Mike's Movie Madness. Welcome to the first episode of Mike's Movie Madness. This is going to be a series of short discussions where I delve deep into the madness that has taken my brain due to the state of modern cinema. I'll go over whatever comes out recently, go over the plot, discuss what worked for me, more importantly, what didn't work for me, and hopefully get something meaningful out of the whole ordeal. I think a good starting point for this series would be the love him or hate him Zack Snyder. He's recently come out with Rebel Moon, and supposedly, before the second part comes out, we'll be getting a director's cut as well. Maybe there's something to talk about here with our 80 proof sanity booster in hand. Let us prepare. After I watched Rebel Moon, A Child of Fire, that first time I was actually pretty excited to begin doing this. Because on one hand it felt like so many things happened, but did they? Did any of it really matter? It seemed like a lot of stuff being thrown at you non-stop, and you're just kind of expected to forget what's happened or how everybody got where they are. I'll go into more details, of course, but the first thing that really bothered me is that the main character can have an interaction with anybody, no matter how small, even if it's one sentence, and somehow that character will find themselves an hour later, days later into the story, and they're willing to put their life on the line. They're willing to die for the main character. They tell the main character in confidence that their life has changed. They don't want to be who they used to be because of how great our main character is. And none of it is earned, but it just happens so fast that I think Zack Snyder was just kind of hoping to be like, yeah, they're best friends and would die for each other now. I know they just met 5 minutes ago on screen, but I'm not really that worried about it, because there's a really cool boss fight happening right now. Regardless, I suppose the best place that we could begin is the beginning. So, here we are, a beautiful planet, perhaps one you've seen in many sci-fi films alike. It has a big Jupiter in the background. This planet, its name is Velt. It's out in the backwaters of space, as opposed to the very crowded parts of space that you commonly encounter. But I suppose Velt is really a moon, after all. The moon of the aforementioned Jupiter in the background. We open up on this planet. Our main character, her name is Cora. She is the only person visible when the film opens up, and she is there what appears to be long past working hours, in the fields, working. That's because Cora is a hard worker. After she's decided she's put in a sufficient amount of extra work on top of the rest of the community, she decides, I'll go join in on the festivities that they're holding. Now, their little village on Velt, I suppose we could call it, is very similar to like a Viking or Celtic type. You know, they have the long house and leaders sat up at the front. It's a situation you've seen time and time again. Now, what they think, and by they, I mean the entire community, including its leader, his name is Sindri. This is not so much of an issue. I kind of liked Sindri, but there is another Sindri in my life, and I just can't stand seeing somebody else call themselves that name. I mean, I don't know many Sindris, and that dwarf was my favorite. Anyway, new Sindri gives a nice speech concerning the relationship between planting crop seeds into the soil and planting human seeds into a human. You know what they say, after all. More babies, more plants. This prompts a discussion between Cora and another member of her community. You see, as hard-working as she is, Cora don't got no man. Now, there are attractive hunters abound in this community, as pointed out a couple of times. She pretty much feels that after all of the trauma that the Mother World, which is where she is from, by the way, she is not from Velt, but she is from an oppressive dictatorship akin to definitely not the Nazi Empire. And we will learn much more of her involvement, but for now, the only thing that's important is that she doesn't feel like she could settle down in this community because it wouldn't be safe. Now remember, we're in the backwaters of outer space. We're not really under the Mother World's direct eye, all the way out here in space. But regardless, this is the reasoning. The next day, this very same Mother World decides to pay old Velt a nice little visit. The Mother World arrives in their giant space-conquering warship. The whole town is scared, and Sindri leads the community. Now, I don't know what kind of space royalties Hugo Boss has been getting, but man, if you see these guys' uniforms, specifically the head space Nazi, Atticus Noble. Now, he's a cool character, but if you see how he's dressed, you would be confused if you had seen a photo perhaps from 1920s or 30s Germany, but this is also aside from the point. Now you see, the whole reason that the Mother World decided to drop by our friends on Velt, you know, even though they're out in the backwaters, is that Atticus Noble has been sent here to find and quell a rebellion that is being led by two siblings, the Blood Axes. Now, this is all well and good. We're not storing any rebels here on Velt. But you see, this is not why Noble has come to Velt. He's come here because he needs food to supply the troops that are hunting the rebels. Why, out here in the backwaters of space, do we have so much food that we can just feed a conquering empire, an entire military force? I wasn't abundantly clear earlier when I was describing Velt. This is a community, and I use the term village because there's maybe 50 of them. Now, farming's hard work. We all saw Cora do it by herself right at the start. How can they possibly even have enough food to help these Imperial Mother World soldiers for a week? They can't, but Zack Snyder says they can. Now, just on a side note, Zack Snyder has heavily fallen off of, would we call it favorable terms? I'm not really sure how I would put it. Maybe I was a fan of his. I can't really tell. 300 was a cool movie, but I was significantly younger when it came out, and it was about Spartans tearing Persians apart. The Battle of 300 is a cool one, and his little fancy camera tricks and slow-mo really did work in that situation. But man, oh man, he really dropped the ball. I would say it was Batman versus Superman that really did it for me. No, forget that. What really put the nail in the coffin was after Joss Whedon's Justice League came out. For I don't know how long. All I heard was, just wait until you see Zack Snyder's true vision. It's coming. It'll be twice as long. It'll be twice as expensive. And it'll be exactly the same in quality. To be honest, I don't even know if I would go that far, but I didn't like the regular Justice League. So where does that leave me? Not in a good place to give you the leeway to tell me the backwater moon Velt can in any way help this space-conquering behemoth of an empire. But this, folks, is where we are left off. Now, of course, there is some pushback at first. Sindri himself says to Atticus Noble, "No, we can't grow that much food. We barely have enough for ourselves, seeing that this is a moon in the backwaters of space, and there's like 45 of us." But someone who will actually turn around in my graces, Guna. He is not necessarily an authority figure, but he is in charge of how much food Velt has and their production. He says, actually, Mr. Space Nazi, we do have enough to do some trade with you. Our leader Sindri, he just likes to keep a little bit extra on the side, to prevent famine, like a normal person. Atticus Noble likes what he hears, so, skipping a little bit in between, he just beats Sindri to death, right in front of the community. This is not good. But since we haven't seen much of this town, it's really not that bad either. This is why having somebody who comes across as sympathetic, like our leader Sindri, for 5 minutes before he gets brutally murdered, we know what you're trying to do. The really good guy got murdered by the really bad guy. But it's just too cheap. If you want me to care about Sindri being murdered, who was he? Besides nice for a few minutes, he gave a exciting speech the night the seeds were planted in their fields. I'm not too sure what you want me to feel for him. And if his only point was to show how evil Noble was, that even the idea of a small village keeping enough food in reserve to not starve, this warrants death. Clearly, being the leader of a backwater moon, not under the direct reach of the mother world, you did not have a big enough farm to sustain my army. That's it. And you're done. Hilariously enough, the next thing that happens is Atticus Noble turns to Gunnar, the person who sold Sindri out and essentially got him murdered, for just stating, "We have food in case of famine." And Noble demands a number of bushels in a certain amount of time. Everybody in the community is upset because everybody knows that they can supply that one-time shipment, but they're all going to starve afterwards and die. So this brings me to yet another issue. Evil empires that require food for their troops from external sources, like say the moon of Velt. If you need their food, why are you going to starve them on your first shipment? You know, knock it back 10 bushels. Maybe you could get bushels forever. But no, Atticus Noble knows that this one shipment will be all that all of his soldiers need to quell this rebellion. And so, he departs. He'll be back for that food in 10 weeks' time. And just when I think we're finally moving along, we still have a while left on Velt. So the Mother World ship leaves, leaving behind a small team of soldiers and what is referred to as a Jimmy robot. How is this different than any other robot? Honestly, if you've seen Star Wars in the last few years, probably any number of other sci-fi shows, there is a friendly, somewhat sentient, humanoid robot that is just super endearing, that you're supposed to like. And here he is. Maybe old Jimmy will have something to do in the second part. He's really only used for some exposition and to show that the Imperial soldiers are assholes. So upon his activation, he's just moving boxes as he is ordered to. He's helping the troops move their supplies into a building that will be used as an outpost of sorts. Now, just to prove, I suppose, his strength, his position in the unit, a second in command, we'll think of him as a sergeant or a staff sergeant type rank, decides to just shoot poor old Jimmy. And just shooting him, knocking him down, knocking the boxes out of his hands, injuring him, telling him to pick up the supplies and keep moving. He's not very happy about this. You know how emotional robots get. And he just goes off down to the river. Old Jimmy is very upset. Now down by the river, he finds a nice lady. She's a lady from the village, just doing some work down by the river. I believe she was doing laundry or filling up water jugs. It really doesn't matter. And the robot sits down and he says, "You're a nice female. That reminds me of the princess of the Mother World. She was a nice female, but now she's gone. And now everyone's getting invaded by evil space Nazis. And that's about all that really happens with him. The girl gives him a nice flower headband, and he does a little robotic blush. His cheeks literally glow pink. And that's all I have to say about Jimmy. Jumping back in with our main character, Cora, she warns the village. Listen, even if we supply the bushels, when they come back, they're going to kill us. So we must mount a defense. Yes, there is 45 of us. Yes, their one ship looked quite capable enough to level all 45 of us. But I can assemble a team that will put the fight to Atticus Noble and the rest of the Mother World. Surprisingly, this goes over relatively well, all things considered. Until, of course, later that evening. Later that evening, a few of the troops left behind by the Mother World decided that they're feeling a bit rapey. So, like any organized military force would, they find the one female in the village who is both nice in that she came up to them offering water, and two, the only other villager that we know, because this is the one that was nice to Jimmy. Therefore, we need to have a payoff. So, the soldiers all bring her into this outpost of sorts that they've been setting up earlier in the day, and they're gonna do a rape. They're just dead set on doing it. Cora hears the cries for help and decides we need to take action. This is when the rebellion of Velt against the Mother World will happen. She charges in full Zack Snyder fashion. Every bullshit attack you could imagine, from this tiny female against large trained soldiers. Light tap, unconscious. Gentle shove, thrown across the room. Slow motion to emphasize that nothing's really happening except insane choreography. This crazy battle, it ends in a stalemate. They're standing off. The Mother World soldier holding a gun against our villager's head. Cora standing there, also aiming one of the fallen soldier's rifles. Then at the last moment, our buddy that I said I have nothing left to talk about, Jimmy the robot, he comes in. He sees the friendly villager being held hostage by his own commander, goes against his programming, and shoots his commander. Now, something very interesting must happen with Jimmy moving forward. Incorrect. He drops the rifle. He runs out of the building, and we don't see him for the rest of the film. And Gunnar, if you remember him, he got Sindri murdered. He now plans to tag along Cora. They will travel the cosmos and recruit a team that will fight the Mother World till the last breath. The evening before they depart, Cora and Gunnar are enjoying a campfire together, where a discussion comes up because he doesn't really trust her. She's only been with the community on Velt for a couple of years, and where she came from are the people that they are literally raising a rebellion to fight. She explains she actually used to be a general in the Motherworld army. She's been to countless planets, invaded countless people, murdered countless people, conquered countless land, caused untold amounts of trauma and pain across the cosmos. This is a good reason to side with her, Gunnar thinks, and peacefully sleeps alongside the campfire. Funnily enough, he actually turns out to be one of the more likable, relatable, and just understandable out of all of the characters we come across. And the position that we're in right now, that doesn't look too great for him or the rest of the crew we're about to pick up. So, Mr. Snyder, if our characters are allowed to act crazy, I suppose our very real commentators should be allowed to as well. Korra and Gunnar leave Velt and head for the planet's port city, Providence. There, they plan to recruit the disgraced Imperial General named Titus. Korra has served alongside him and knows he is a ferocious warrior, and would do anything to get back at his Motherworld enemies. Once they arrive in town, they meet the overly Irish-accented leader of the Sons of Anarchy, named Kai. He says something along the lines of, I'd take ya to meet you, Titus, but there's 2 other people we got meet on the way. These 2 warriors will come to know as Tarak and Nemesis, and I will introduce them as we get there. Tarak, he is a beast tamer, but he is currently being held in slavery. He is our first stop, and we will be going to collect him first. Now, I don't want to spend a tremendous amount of time on the upcoming sections, mainly due to this is just Korra's Pokemon hunt, for lack of a better way to put it. She's just essentially traveling around, throwing Pokeballs at whoever she thinks looks cool. Now Korra, Gunnar, and Kai all go to where Tarak is being held captive. They speak to the slave owner, and I was curious what exactly kind of business he was running, because he makes a bet with Korra that if Tarak can tame the beast outside, it's like an all-black griffin, I guess, I'm not sure. It's a big mythological creature. If he could tame it, then he can leave. He's no longer a slave. But if he can't, then all of them become slaves. Now, like I was saying before, I don't know what exactly you're using slaves for, if you're perfectly okay with having 0 or 4. But these are the cards we are dealt, and therefore, Tarak the Beast Tamer must go tame a beast. There is some excitement. The creature nearly escapes several times, but in the end, Tarak tames him and joins the crew. Next up, we need to find Nemesis. It's a very easy thing to do, apparently. But we find her on her way to do battle with a giant spider lady who has been kidnapping and killing children because her children died due to the humans building a city there, or some ridiculousness. So, Nemesis is there to avenge the children and kill the spider lady. Nemesis and the Spider Lady engage in a one-on-one fight. Now keep in mind, Korra, Gunnar, Kai, and Tarak are all unseen and do nothing to help. Now the Spider Lady, she has a human child with her that she plans on kidnapping and killing, so Nemesis is fighting to free her. Now, the only thing is that during this whole fight, the child is just sitting, like, very nearby the combat, not really being saved. But this is why I said earlier, Gunnar is actually a pretty good guy, because he's the only person, and the only person without really an extreme set of skills too, that goes out there and saves the child. Now this sounds good right now, but it's going to become pretty bad later on, so we'll come back to it. Nemesis is like a part robot lady, with 2 swords that she can activate to essentially become red lightsabers. The Spider Lady is killed. Korra throws her Pokeball, and now Nemesis comes along. Back on the ship, Gunnar and Korra have a conversation, and Korra pretty much compliments him for going out of his way and saving the little girl. This is good, until Gunnar responds, and he says, "You would have done the same thing. You want to help people, just like me." But I immediately had to say, but she didn't. She just stood there and watched the child be in danger. So no, she wouldn't have also, because she didn't. The next person on our cosmic scavenger hunt is the General Titus that I mentioned earlier. So the crew, they fly to his moon. Now this moon is literally just ancient Rome. There is a giant, and when I say giant, I mean like the size of a city giant, Colosseum, as soon as they leave their ship. Now, this is going to be a quick one. Korra finds Titus. He's drunk, he's depressed, and he doesn't want to fight. Korra says, "But you should." And so he does. And now he's in the crew. And I'm not even necessarily rushing through this. That's about all we get. Now, I made a comment back in the opening of this video about the next scene, but I didn't include any details. I complained that people just seem to do whatever Korra wants and become immediately infatuated with her. Now, I would say this next part is probably the most egregious of them all, at least for me. I didn't like it the most. Korra has a conversation on the ship with Kai. And what Kai has to tell her just might surprise you. "Oi, Korra, I think you're a nice lady. So I'm going to put down my life of crime and fight alongside you and die for your cause. It's been about 2 days since I met you, and you really haven't done anything for me except fly on my ship. But now I love you." And just like that, Kai is no longer just our pilot, but our combat buddy, a warrior willing to die for us. Moving along, we learned some information about Gunnar that we somewhat knew earlier, but I saved talking about it till now because we actually get some details and the payoff for it. So, the extra supply that he offered Atticus Noble was not the first time he has tried to sell the Moon of Velt's extra food supplies. He used to supply the Blood Axe Rebellion with food from the extras that they would grow. And there's nobody else you really want on your rebellion, aside from an army of rebels. So the plan then becomes Go find the Blood Axes. Gunnar, knowing their location because he has traded with them in the past, and convince them to join their side and defend the Moon of Velt against the Mother World. They arrive to where the Blood Axes are located, and it's not very hard to convince Brother Blood Axe to join the rebellion. We are, after all, fighting the same enemy, so why not come fight them with us? And he takes maybe 10 of his rebels with him. Sister Blood Axe, she disagrees, along with a lot of the Blood Axe rebellion. So now we're left with Brother Blood Axe, and 10 of his rebels have joined the crew. Soon after, Cora and her team of rebels leave the planet. Atticus Noble is not far behind, and he shows up and destroys the entire planet. Back on the ship, Kai suggests we all go to a local trading post, gather some supplies, drop off one last package that he has to deliver. It turns out, waiting for our crew at the trading outpost is Atticus Noble and his Imperial soldiers. They knew to be here because Kai told them they were on their way. You see, the last package that he was referring to drop off was the crew of rebels. Everybody besides Gunnar is taken into custody. He isn't taken into custody because they want to give him one more chance to follow through on that food shipment they agreed on earlier. Kai tries to convince Gunnar to use a paralyzer gun on Cora. But since Gunnar is the best character in the movie, he kills Kai and releases our crew of rebels instead. With our crew now free, a battle between Cora, Brother Blood Axe and his rebels, and our crew against Atticus Noble and the Motherworld forces breaks out. Brother Blood Axe loses his life in the conflict, allowing a situation to occur where Cora and Atticus Noble have to one-on-one fight each other. We all know how this ends, so Cora murders him by herself. As the battle concludes, Cora and her crew get back on their ship and depart for Velt. Everybody on the team seems very excited to be here, and they think it's a place worth defending. But, as it turns out, the Motherworld forces were able to recover Atticus Noble's body from the battlefield. They have very sophisticated technology that can just bring him back to life. So now, returning from the dead, almost immediately after being killed, he is given orders from the Motherworld to go and capture Cora and bring her to the Motherworld alive so she can be executed properly. This is the end of the movie, and a very clear setup for what the plot of part 2 will be. Now that the plot is complete, I'm going to crack open something a bit weaker and go into my final thoughts. This movie was bad. I did not like it. I don't think I like Zack Snyder, but I did like Gunnar, and that's saying something, because he was just a normal guy, doing normal things, like an average person. And this is a spacefaring action-adventure movie, so for him to stand out, that's not great. Our main character, devoid of any personality or likability, is liked almost universally, except for by the people she hates. And the more I think about Korra and her crew's plan, I actually think she made things significantly worse for Velt. Because originally, they were worried that they might come back and kill them once they retrieve the bushels. But that was the extent of the threat at the time, and it wasn't even a threat that was made to them. It was assumed by Korra, because that's what she would have done when she was in the Motherworld army. But now, you've killed Noble. The Motherworld knows of your rebellion, and you've returned to the place you want to defend, with like 5 new people. I don't think that defense of Velt is going to go very well for the defenders. But I suppose we'll just have to wait until mid-April when part 2 comes out. If there's anybody still tuned in, I do appreciate you checking out my first episode. This is Mike's Movie Madness, and I'll see you around.